to our next speaker, who is Shanzeh, a high school student who is currently living in South Africa. She will be talking about her work in combating gender-based violence. So if you're ready, Shanzeh, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Okay, so obviously I'm talking about my initiative called Say No to Gender-Based Violence. But along with sharing what I'm doing, I also kind of want to give you a little bit of a story of how I got into service and, why I love it so much. Because, a lot of times I feel like service is looked at something that, is a requirement. But, when you find something that you're truly passionate about, like, it sticks with you. And, at some point it can be like, what keeps you going. So I'd say like, you don't have to leave my presentation thinking like about what I did, but rather that I was able to do something and that you're also able to do something. So yeah, so how did my passion, sorry, to end gender-based violence came to be, right? So this slide might look a little bit confusing. I'm gonna start by saying I play ice hockey, and pretty much how that happened is one day, it was about 12 years ago now, my dad took the whole family to the ice rink as a little family thing. And while he was buying the tickets, I sat by the bench watching the hockey players play. And my mom came up next to me and she told me, Shanzeh, you're never doing this. It's too dangerous. And I said, okay, thinking that it was gonna be like that. But here we are, and I played ice hockey for a very long time. I still play it. But I think something that happened is while I got into the ice hockey culture, I noticed how toxic it can be towards women and girls, just due to the fact that it is predominantly, men who play the sport. And like, you can see that like people watch the NHL, but not the WNHL. People are constantly talking about men's ice hockey, but not women's ice hockey. So as soon as I got those comments, like, okay, Shanzeh, you're not good at hockey. And I was like, I know I'm not good at hockey. Like, I was the girl that like stood at the end of the rink while everyone else was at the other end. But that was okay. So pretty much I kept playing hockey, and in 7th grade, I finally made the 3rd best women's ice hockey team for my age level in North America. And that was really, really cool. But that was also when we figured out, okay, like we could move to South Africa. And honestly, to me, that sounded insane because, I had pictured my whole life, growing up in Washington, D.C. and staying here and not doing anything else but that. And moving to South Africa sounded, awesome at some level and at another level scary. So then I moved to South Africa, and while I left a very good opportunity, I play national women's ice hockey team there, which is really, really cool. And I guess like seeing that the culture is the same in all the places that, girls are constantly put down by men in the field, and like, it was just really bad. So then in 8th grade, I had to choose this project, which we called the Human Rights Project. And we had to choose any topic, and some of us were assigned because I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. So I was assigned gender-based violence. And when I first heard of that, like I was like, I have no idea what this is. And I was so scared. Like, I don't think any of the people in my 8th grade class are on here, but if they were, they would be able to speak to the fact that like it would be like the night before something was due and I did not have it done because I had no idea what it was. So once I got there and I truly understood it, I dove into it, and I was so happy to do that because it was just something that really moved me, especially being in South Africa, which actually has the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world. To put that into more perspective, a very, very terrifying fact is that a girl in South Africa has a higher chance of being raped than graduating secondary school, which is pretty much like high school. And I think that's absolutely terrible, but I think it really showed me, like this is the country I'm living in. And, as a youth who wants to be part of this, service learning world, I should do something about it. So that kind of got me inspired. Moving on. The Orange the World 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. So as I entered ninth grade, I was still, feeling very touched by what I learned in eighth grade about the gender-based violence. And I thought, okay, why don't I do something, more? Because, I felt like I wasn't done with it. I think that's what happens when you really like something and you really feel passionate about it. Like, if you can't get it off your mind, what can you do? So pretty much, I decided I was going to start with my local and global, local community. Okay. And
London After Dark. At this time, the Columbia Broadcasting System brings you.
I am so sorry. Let me figure this out for a second.
No worries. Okay. So pretty much it's a United Nations like sponsored annual campaign, which is led through late November to early December. And it's 16 days of activism. So it's like 16 days designated to talking about gender-based violence. And it actually goes through some really important days. Like there's a special Women's Day in, I think, South Africa. And there's Human Rights Day. So it goes through a lot of important things to, really recognize all of the topics that it covers, because it's a very broad term. So that's when I brought it to my school. And I started by putting up posters. I emailed my service learning coordinator of high school. And you can see the poster on the left side is the poster I put up around school. And obviously support the cause by wearing orange. Some background information on that is that orange is the color of a world free of violence. And the QR code goes to the, if you look to the right of that, that's a website I created so that people at my school could be more aware of gender-based violence and learn about it, especially during the 16 days, because that was really, really important. And honestly, like the turnout was absolutely amazing. People were constantly wearing orange, and I thought like that was so amazing, especially because, it was just like sent out in the daily notices, which is like an email everyone gets, and like no one reads it. So it was really nice that people did that. And what was even more surprising is that I would notice middle schoolers and even some elementary schoolers wearing orange. And it would be like a bright orange shirt. So I'd be like, there's no way this was mistaken, which was just really, really cool. Yeah, so that was kind of my first action. And then moving on, one cake at a time. So this is what I made as like a small initiative as part of my larger initiative. Obviously that's Say No to Gender-Based Violence. So pretty much what I kind of made the slogan for this is like Cupcakes and Conversations. 5 minutes away from my school in South Africa, there is a township called Diepsloot, and it holds the highest rates of rape and sexual assault in all of South Africa. So, when you talk about documentaries that are filming about rape in South Africa or gender-based violence in South Africa, Diepsloot will be the most mentioned one. And that's just a fact, which is really devastating, but it is the reality. So there's a school there, which I was able to get in touch with. And you can see in the photos, there's like me meeting with people, some of the teachers and the principals of schools to talk about gender-based violence and how we can like implement that into the curriculum so we can talk about it and start conversations. And what I was able to do is create a space where I would invite anyone who wanted to be there to talk about gender-based violence. And I honestly didn't think there was going to be many people coming, but there was. And it was just really great. And as you can see, like the idea of cupcakes kind of came into play with like this whole idea of savoring the moment, kind of. It was like symbolism to the fact that, this was a really great conversation and, you deserve something nice because, we're talking about all these things. And you can see like there's N and O written on them, which goes in accordance with my Say No to Gender-Based Violence. And it also has more symbolism of the fact that in order to say no to gender-based violence, we have to come together as one. So moving on, teaching and ribbon selling. So something that I do on the side, which I really love to do, is tutoring young kids from across the world online. Sometimes this can happen at absolutely extreme hours, but I just find it so inspiring to do it. So, it's worth it. And so I thought, what better way to talk about gender-based violence globally than to bring this in a little bit into my curriculum in what I teach. So this could be, I teach kids anywhere from like 10th grade and kindergarten even, depending on the subject, of course. But it really, I think educating people on gender-based violence starts with the way that we treat people, the way that we talk to people, the way that we even teach. It's really in everything. This is how we, shape the world. It's the way we do things. So by implementing it into my curriculum a little bit, I started to create a space where people felt more powerful and people felt like, I'm really worthy of, not living in countries with such high rates of gender-based violence. And, I'm so much more than all of the stuff in the world that is really scary, especially for young kids. So then at my school, we have this thing called Family Fun Day. And I started selling orange ribbons there because I thought it was going to be, really great. All the parents were there. So I could just walk around and ask them like, oh, do you want to donate? Do you want to buy a ribbon? And it did work out, which was really cool. So yeah, I think honestly, like out of all the things that I've talked about just now, the Cupcakes and Conversations were like one of the most hands-on things to do. But I'm trying to make it now go into something bigger where I take the proceeds that I got from my ribbons and fund hampers to women of the township Deep Sloot who are either vulnerable to or survivors of gender-based violence. So that's kind of my project and what I'm doing. So yeah.
So if any of you have any questions for Shanzeh, please put them in the chat.
Okay, I see. Did you struggle when moving from the US to South Africa? Yeah, it was actually not ideal for me, but you just have to make the most of things, and I believe that everything happens for a reason, so I try to go with that for the most part. Okay, who is your biggest inspiration? That's a good question, but I have to say it's my service learning teacher. Her name's Miss Beatty. She is absolutely like the most wonderful woman I've ever met in my entire life. And I love my mom. I love, all the other women in my life, but Miss Beatty, like, she has always been there for me since the start. And since it was absolutely nothing, I think out of all the teachers in my school, she's been the most helpful and kind. And even when there's points like, when you can burn out from school because of mental health and, constantly doing work in high school, she would always be there with like a nice hug or anything. So she's definitely my inspiration. Okay, let me see. Have you met any survivors of GBV? Well, if you think about it, yes. Because when I went to the school in Deep Sloot, in the highest like rates of rape in South Africa, that township, of course, there were going to be people in there who had really struggled with gender-based violence and people who have, mothers and sisters and anyone else who's been a victim. Okay, let me see. How did I grow as a leader? So as a leader, I have to say I definitely grew with service learning. And like, that's not even just like, just to say it, but it's like really true. I have to say, like, when I first started off in like middle school is when they start introducing service learning to the curriculum. I was like, okay, this is just a requirement. Like, I would like do whatever they told us to do. And I was, not that inspired by it, but it was just, very fixed. And I think as I found my own passions and I figured out that, like, you know, I can do things myself, I don't constantly need the adult there. You know, I figured out I can actually lead things myself. And what, if you didn't know, this whole project is completely by me. And sadly, no one else wants to join, but that's okay. We'll get there. So yeah. Let me see. What made you choose gender-based violence? So it was pretty much the connection that I had with hockey, of course, because of the way that I was seeing boys treating girls and even people saying stuff to me. I found it really difficult to deal with that. And then when I learned about gender-based violence in South Africa, I was like, wow, like, you know, this does connect in many ways. And, you know, it starts with, like, you know, what people say to people at school, what boys tell girls and do to girls. It's, you know, it's in everything. So I thought it would be like really interesting. And it has been really interesting for me. Did you learn any other languages in South Africa? Yeah, I can speak Afrikaans. That's cool. But there's 11 official languages of South Africa, so can't learn on them all. Let me see. What have you learned from this endeavor? You know, that's a really good question, because I think one of my favorite takeaways from this is like, I learned that we're all so similar. Like when I went to that room full of South Africans who I had never met, who I didn't know at all, from a township that I had heard many things about. Of course, I was going to be scared because I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. I have no idea who I'm about to talk to. But as I left that conversation, I felt so happy because I had made connections with people without even having to really, you know, struggle with it. And I learned that, you know, as youth, as teenagers, we're all so much more similar than we think. And, you know, people say like, it's a small world or whatever. And yeah, it is a small world, but it's also a big world. And we also have all these, you know, new ideas, and we live in these own, I guess, realms of our own. And, you know, as we collaborate with them together, I think it's really important, and it's really, really cool. So I just learned a lot about South Africa and how connections are made. So that was really cool. What kind of project do you hope to do next? So I hope to implement a day in my school, like a day in the year, where we actually dedicate it just to gender-based violence. And I'm hoping that it can be during either like the March area where it's International Women's Day, or during the 16 days. So I'm hoping that we can do that soon, because that would be really, really cool. Yeah. Why did I move to South Africa? It was my mom's job opportunity. She worked at the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health. And then she just got this like random opportunity, like, oh, do you want to move to South Africa? So we just thought it was really cool. And did your worry and desire to solve this problem start since you lived in the US? That's also a good question. You know, I think it did at some level, but I felt so powerless being, you know, that girl on the ice that absolutely sucked. And I couldn't, you know, do much about it. I couldn't just say, oh, don't say that about me, when it was true. But, you know, it did start. But I think my ability and my passion to truly do something, like the drive to do it, really, you know, accelerated when I learned about gender-based violence in South Africa. Okay. What does it mean to be a leader and activist against gender-based violence? So I think people could answer that in different ways. For me, I would say it means to be someone who starts conversations. I like to think of myself as a conversation starter. I like to bring it up in my conversations with my friends while, you know, they're showing me a TikTok and I'm telling them about this really cool fact I learned about what the UN is doing to stop gender-based violence. And I think really just being, I would like a leader and an activist. It's just, you know, I feel like I bring the drive to my school of talking about gender-based violence, because we'd never had these kinds of conversations before, and we had never really done anything about it before. So that would, what I would say. Do you know if people have tried to implement ways to avoid gender-based violence? yes, there are many countries doing many different things. If you search up like a country and their, government's laws and stuff, there are people who are trying to do things. Even South Africa has been constantly trying to do things. But unfortunately, of course, in the highest rated place of gender-based violence, it's going to be very, very difficult to stop it. But I do believe it can happen. So yes, there are many ways. Okay, this one is kind of, what are you planning next to promote in Orange World? Kind of already answered that, but yeah, the Orange the World Day. Okay, this is a good question. Do you see yourself more as an inspirational speaker on GBV or more of someone who acts upon the issue? I want to be more of someone who acts upon the issue. I think we've had all these times to like talk about what we're doing and to like, kind of showcase it. But I think more than showcasing, what I care about is doing. I'm really like a doer is what they call them, I think. But I really like to act on issues, especially gender-based violence. And, with such a complex topic, it is hard to find ways to like, implement and to change it. But I think the more conversations I can bring up about it, the better it can be. So I would definitely say someone who acts upon the issue. Let me see. Did you get hate for the movement and how did you overcome it? I didn't get any hate from the movement. I just guess I didn't get a big audience at the first start. And I think that was really it. I didn't get much hate. Okay. Do you believe that moving to South Africa impacted your ideas on gender-based violence? Do you think it would have had different, do you think you would have had different ideas if you hadn't moved? Yeah, I think so. I think I would still be stuck in that cycle of, having things said to me or, even like when I'm in a girls ice hockey team there, like I don't know what I would have done, but I think definitely South Africa changed my ideas a lot. Let me see. Okay, I have until 2:25 for questions. Thank you, Bella. Okay, what advices would you recommend for people who are trying to do something similar? I think the most important thing is to actually do something because, we spend all this time like, oh, I'm going to do this and, I'm going to do this. But then we find all these excuses like, oh, we don't have the right resources or, oh, we don't have the right people to connect to. And if you really just like, keep doing it and like really driving yourself forward with it, you're going to get somewhere with it. So I have to say, like, if you're trying to do something similar, at your school, get in touch with your service learning coordinator, go Google and find someone who can help you with this because, it's like what they're saying nowadays on like social media is like, if they wanted to, they would. And like, I think that's like so truthful in all ways. Why do you think the rates of GBV in your area are so high? So I think that's really just because of the history of South Africa and apartheid. If you want to look that up, you can, but pretty much that was just like the segregation and separation of South Africa by Europeans. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I have no idea. Do you believe your story can make other people stand up for GBV? Yeah, I do think so. I actually really hope so. I don't know. I think it would be really great if people did want to do something about GBV because, clearly there's not enough people caring about it and doing things about it for it to stop. But, we start somewhere. So I guess I'll keep going until people join me. Yeah. Okay, I have like 1 minute, so let me see if I can find a really quick question. Okay, what is the percentage of people with gender-based violence? I feel like that's a little bit of a confusing question because like people can be affected by gender-based violence. So like for some statistics, I can just tell you like 1 in 3 women will face some act of gender-based violence. And something to keep in mind is that gender-based violence is not only something that can be against like women. It can be also against any gender at all, males, females, and of course, while it's most prominent for women to face gender-based violence, it does happen for other people. So yeah, I don't know how much of the minute we have left, but we're good.
All right. Thank you, Shanzeh, for sharing your work with gender-based violence.